Hello. If I'm timing this out right, my last video was a video of a behind the scenes look at filming some scenes for my friend Kia. She's an actor who just moved back to the United States from China and needed some scenes for her reel. So we filmed a few things, and I kind of just did my normal color correction and grading thing that I normally do. But I recently was approached by a company called Dehancer to check out their film emulation plugin. And I'm really excited to try it on these scenes because I've got these 3 different scenes and I did different color grading for each of them. And I want to see if the different film stocks in Dehancer can also do that thing, give these films different looks. Because one is like a bank heist movie and I kind of gave it like a 70s vibe and filmed it on anamorphic. The second one is like a teen or college comedy. And the third one is like an indie dramedy thing. So they each can look very different. They were all shot on the Canon C70. And I'm pretty excited to check out Dehancer because I've used a lot of different film emulation tools. And while a lot of them do a good job of getting the color right and emulating very specific film stocks, Dehancer does some things that I find really interesting that other lookup tables or plugins don't do. And I just want to poke around and check it out. So let's jump into this first scene, the bank heist scene. I filmed it in anamorphic. I wanted it kind of like a vintagey feel. And this is just the Canon Log 2 out of the camera. And I put my edits all inside of a compound clip. I've got the clips. I've got a little bit of color correction on them and balancing. And I just put it all in a compound clip so we could put Dehancer on top of all of it. So let's open up the effects. Let's go down to film emulation, and here's Dehancer Pro. Dehancer was super easy to install, and then I had to put the activation key in it down here. And Dehancer is available not only for Final Cut, but also for Premiere and DaVinci Resolve. And they even have an iOS app, which is really cool. You can take photos with your phone, or you can even import them from an external camera. I could take pictures with my EOS R and import them and then edit them in Dehancer and apply film stock looks, which is very, very cool because film is very expensive right now. And I still love the look of film and film grain and the different stocks. It's very frustrating that film is so expensive right now, but it's very cool that I can emulate it right in my devices. Okay, so like a lot of other film emulation tools, Dehancer has mapped a ton of color spaces, including C-Log 2 from the C70. So I can go in and say, nope, I am using a camera. And it is a Canon camera, and they've got all kinds of different cameras in here, which is great. And I used the C70 and it was C-Log 2, and boom, we've got a lot of the contrast and saturation back. And it's actually pretty close to where I color graded this originally, which is great. So let's just go down the list here. There's some different tools here for exposure and temperature and tint, but there's not like full on color grading tools. So if I did need to color grade, I would go and probably use color wheels or color curves and make some adjustments here. Maybe I want a little more saturation, but then what I would do is I would collapse this and I would put the color wheels before Dehancer typically, because this is more of a color correction before the look. If you're in DaVinci, you're doing all your nodal stuff and you can do stuff in series and in parallel. But in terms of Final Cut, we just have stuff in series. Effects that happen first and then trickle down. All the other effects after that affect everything that came before it. Okay, so I'm not exactly sure what defringe does. I'll need to look this up on their website, but I don't need, it's not even enabled right now, but yeah, we can, let me actually turn off the color wheels there, but I can increase exposure, and it blooms really nicely. That's pretty cool, but I can also just reset that parameter. It's a little warm or it's not warm enough. I can cool it off, but typically as I push temperature one way or another, I also need to compensate with tint. The tint is pretty clean. I don't know if that's exactly where I would do it if I was doing it in color wheels or with color curves, but that's pretty close. And I'm just going to keep this where it was just to kind of keep things on the level so you can just see and follow along with me. All right, the next section is film. This is where we can pick the capturing film negative stock, which is very cool. There are a ton of film stocks in here. I think this is the most I've seen in a plugin like this. There's some film stocks I'm not even familiar with, like these Rolly ones or these Astrum ones. I'm not familiar with those film stocks, so it's kind of cool. I got to just take their word that they've mapped them correctly. But honestly, Kodak Vision 500T, 50D, 250D, 200T are all the very common modern Kodak film stocks. There's also some of the Fuji ones up here. But what I found really interesting is there's some really modern ones like CineStill, which are film stocks for cinema that have the backing stripped off because you can't process it in the same C41 color that you would stills film. So they took the backing off of it and you can now process it as C41. Again, very expensive right now, but it's a very cool look for still photography, but it kind of overblooms because the backing has been stripped away. So it's not exactly like, oh, I'm using cinema film for my stills. It's still like changed. It's still kind of degraded in a different way. I really liked what the 500T and the 500D were doing. I want to stick with the 50D. I'm going to stick with the Vision 3 50D. And then there's more exposure tools you can kind of push and pull that there. So this is already enabled. This is really nice here. Film compression. So a video typically can exceed the color or brightness, the luma spectrum than film. And you can kind of compress. So if you look at the paint cans back here, you can see that, I don't know if this would necessarily be considered clipping on the film, but it kind of brings it within spec and it does it pretty cleanly. That's kind of nice. I'm gonna turn that back off because I think some other tools down here will be better served if that's off. We can expand. We can push things closer to the black point, or let me reset that, or to the white point. We can really push it individually rather than just the exposure slider. So we can make a really contrasty, crunchy image this way if we wanted to. But I want to also kind of keep these at a standard point so you can see what's going on here. Print. This is a very cool section. I think a lot of film emulation tools don't have the print option, because when we used to make films, you would capture it on film and then you'd have your negative, but then you would have to print it to a positive. So there would be another type of film that your movie would get printed onto. So right now we're on linear. So essentially the negative has been scanned and then flipped back to a positive, but they've also scanned these pretty common Fuji and Kodak film stocks. And then there's Cineon, which is like, if you scanned a film and you wanted it to be log, that's the film version of log versus like Canon log and Sony log and F log and in log, all the different logarithmic formulas. This is the specific one for film. And then there's also as if it was printed on glossy paper. That's kind of cool. That's more for a photography thing if you scanned a photo. But a lot of film positives that get scanned, the actual reel that would play in a projector, where are printed on Kodak 2383 film. And if I disable this, it does add a bit more contrast to the image, but it also adds a little bit of color character to it that wasn't necessarily there before. And I think this looks really good. That said, when I've picked this, I may want to go back, and now that it's, quite a bit crunchier, I might want to go back and pick a different film stock to kind of compensate what the print stock is doing. So maybe I liked the Kodak Vision 350D when I originally picked it while we were still, let me change that back, while we were still on linear, because it was a bit more contrasty than the 500T. But once I apply the Kodak 2383 print film, that contrast kind of pops back in. And then there's more controls here for exposure, white, contrast here, and even saturation. So, and then another analog range limiter, which kind of works like the film compression. But yeah, there's a lot to this. This is very cool. And this isn't even the stuff that I said I was like excited to check out. There's still some cool features in here that I'm excited for. Color correction in the color head. So, before we had digital intermediates and we could do digital color, you kind of had to color with chemicals, the way that you processed your film, and you would add the colors in here, and you can, do a bunch of tweaking. I'm not an expert in this, but it is pretty cool that we can, kind of change the temperature of just the shadows, just the midtones, just the highlights. Of course, again, I can do that in my color wheels up here, but it's cool that it's in here, and it's also in the style of the tools. And it's named, and I'm assuming emulating the ways that people had to just kind of add or subtract chemicals in the color timing process. It was called color timing because it was the amount of time that your film sat in these chemicals. It's pretty wild. Here's another great tool, and there are other ways to emulate film grain. Other plugins have their own film grain like algorithms. You can have scanned film grain and overlay it onto your media, but looks like similar to other film grain emulation tools. We've got things like the size of the grain. You can change how much the grain is applied to just the shadows, the midtones, the highlights, how much chroma is of the film. Whether it's the film grain from the negative or from the print, the positive. That's kind of interesting. And there's experimental digital film grain. I wonder if it's gonna make your film grain look like, I don't know, like Collateral or something. That's funny. Now, here are the tools that I'm very interested in that not a lot of other film emulation plugins are doing, including halation. Halation is kind of the aberration that happens around bright images. So in this clip, I was pretty good at minimizing like specular highlight, but there is a quick shot where Brandon's character looks out the window here. So if I turn halation on, we should get a little bit of red fringing around the edges here. And even then, the C70's highlights are so well controlled here that it's even kind of hard to pick up on it. But yeah, even just kind of right on the edge of this door frame here, a little bit of red gets introduced. That's pretll cool. We'll have to look at halation in another one of these clips. Okay, and the source limiter tool slider here, it looks like it's just kind of limiting how much of the like red fringing we're getting, how well controlled the halation is. That's pretty cool. So that's one thing, this program has to like analyze what are the specular highlights, what's clipping in the white, and then kind of put an edge around it and make it red. That's kind of cool. It looks like there's a blue compensation. Some film stocks kind of like did red and then blue around the red. That's very, very nice. Now, what goes along with that is the blooming. Because film is like a physical object with crystals inside of it, and the light hits the crystals, and the crystals kind of are changed by the light. Sometimes those crystals kind of bleed into nearby areas. And blooming is what happens when something that gets bright, or when there's a highlight, and then its kind of brightness kind of bleeds into surrounding darker objects. So with blooming off, you can kind of see again the door frame, kind of the garage frame here. Oh, even kind of the white on the wall, and his skin is kind of blooming into the surrounding areas. Now, I think this is a little strong. Can I? No, that doesn't quite control that. Maybe it's that source limiter again. Yeah, the source limiter. We can kind of dial the blooming back there. That's pretty cool. And there's a whole bunch of other tools I'll have to dig into. That's pretty nice. You can desaturate your blooming. That's kind of cool. And yeah, this really just helps sell the film effect on this clip. That's really nice because I wanted this clip to really have a vintage feel to it. Vignetting, that's cool. Like vignetting is not hard to do. You can do it with color wheels, and you can create a mask that kind of just gets the corners and bring the exposure down. But it looks like this vignette is also kind of maybe not. Maybe that's just these anamorphic lenses, these SLR Magic anamorphic lenses are a little soft in the corners. I thought maybe it's kind of applying a blur to the edges, but I think that's just the lens. I think it's just exposure. Otherwise, I think there would be a slider for how much blur we're getting. Film breath. I believe this is going to be the tiny changes in exposure as the film plays. Film is sliding through a mechanical camera, and unless your camera is really well calibrated, the film might slide forward and back just a little bit, increasing and decreasing exposure. So there can be little changes in exposure over time, back and forth as that film kind of wiggles through the camera. I'm not going to turn this on, although I want this to have a vintage feel. I think a lot of film scanners and good DIs, good color correction, kind of compensates for this when restoring old film. So I don't think we see this as much. If you watch a restoration of Citizen Kane, the Blu-ray or 4K Blu-ray of Citizen Kane or Lawrence of Arabia, this has all been like compensated for and smoothed out. So it's cool that it's in there, but I don't think I want that on this clip. But gate weave, I think I do want on. This is emulating, like I said, the film kind of shakes inside the camera, or it would shake in the projector as it's playing. So gate weave is kind of the subtle shaking of the film from capturing in the camera or the projector if it's not perfectly calibrated. And it should be very subtle. Playback is a little tough. I am on better performance. Maybe if I turn film grain off, I think it's like generating grain. That's probably what's kind of slow. Oh yeah, playback's a lot smoother. It's still pretty jittery. So this is a very processor intensive plugin. I would want to render this out and watch it. I have rendering off right now just so I can make this tutorial and capture the screen. But theoretically, gate weave is just a little bit of shake of the film in the frame. And I believe if I turn it off, yeah, see, it punches in. As I turn it on, it punches in because it's going to create a little bit of shake. I know some people do it, especially in Final Cut, with the like handheld effect and just setting it on the like smallest amount. But I don't think that the Final Cut plugin for handheld necessarily looks like gate weave, and I'll need to render this out, but I'm pretty sure this is going to look pretty good. And then, how much, how fast it's going to shake. So we can have it be kind of slow. It had it at 3, I believe. If I reset this, 3. And then how much left and right and up and down and rotational shake it's going to have. And you can really increase this, but the more you increase it, the more cropping in you're going to do on your video. You're going to lose some resolution with that. Oh, we can kind of monitor. Oh yeah, we've got kind of a false color look here. That's nice. Just making sure. Yeah, like I nailed exposure. My skin tones. Oh, she moves closer to the light. She kind of walks in, and she gets a little brighter. But we're still in pink. We're not too bad. I think that's looking pretty good. Let me turn that back off. Oh yeah, she's she's kind of fair skinned, so hitting the pink there isn't too bad. I can also a clipping indication. Let's see those paint cans. Were we clipping here? No, we weren't, but I'm sure this is going to do some sort of zebra effect to let me know if I'm clipping any of the highlights there. Total impact. So this is essentially the how much of the effect do I want? Here's where we originally started, and if I slide this up, more of the effect comes in. So if I'm like, this is a little dramatic, I can dial this back to like 75, 85%, but I really like where we are. Let me turn the film grain back on. And it is a little strong. Let me dial this back, probably just like to a 5, maybe this is kind of vintage looking, maybe to like a 10 or 11. If I bring it up full screen and kind of see, yeah, that's some good film grain texture. I'm going to dial this back to 10 though. That was still a little strong for my taste, even though this is supposed to have a vintage feel. I don't want to have so much film grain I lose detail in her eyes. You know, this is an actor's reel, not just like I'm trying to make a gritty bank heist movie. So I'm going to clean that up just a little bit. Very cool. So that's all the effects in Dehancer. So let's go through these other scenes and apply some looks. So again, I'm going to go grab Dehancer from Film Emulation. And again, I'm going to tell it this was a Canon C70 in C-Log 2. Very nice. Now this scene has a big blown out background behind Aubrey here. So let's see if we can get some of that halation and bloom going here. Again, I wish this was on here ahead of time. That would be nice. So I can kind of see what it looks like with the print on. Yeah, so this is like a comedy. It needs to be a little crunchy, but not like terribly so. I kind of like what the 200T is looking like for this, just kind of as a base, but I do want, yeah, if I bring the compression on, it brings those highlights down. That is great. That's a ton of recovery that I don't have to like manually do for the C70 C-Log 2. Color density is pretty cool. Like you want thickness in the skin tone. We can bring that up. That's nice. I want a dense image. I want some nice, I don't want their skin to feel thin. I want it to feel nice and thick there. Okay, contrast. Maybe a little too much. Where were those tools that let me do in the expand. Okay, so now I can kind of just control the black point. I want to get the hair like almost black, but not, I don't want like all of the hair to be black. So I want it to be a little dark in the shadows here. And then, yeah, the white point I can control, but I've already got that film compression tool on, but yeah, I guess I could theoretically, emulate that by bringing the white point down. But let's leave this on. This is kind of a fun tool here. That's the tonal range is kind of acting like a contrast slider as well. It's just allowing it to get hotter or darker. That's interesting. But I also have a tonal contrast for the print film as well. So there are some like overlapping tools, and it's important because color correction and color grading, it is a pushing and pulling game. You push something too far and then you pull it back with another tool. So like I get it that it's there, but yeah, there's a lot of sliders to do that back and forth on. I'm going to this is going to be kind of like a cleaner college comedy thing. So I want the film grain to be much tighter on this one. Let's see. Where is it? If I go film resolution the other way? No, that made it bigger. Let's go that way. Let's just go to like 1. It's still pretty grainy. I wonder, do I just have to dial these back? Let's just cut these in half. Let's see that. Yeah, that's a lot cleaner. Okay, I had to bring the shadows, midtones, and highlights down to really clean up the grain. there. Yeah, let's turn on the halation and blooming for this one. So we get a little bit more red, local diffusion. That should kind of pinpoint it to these areas. And then blue compensation. Now this still isn't quite a specular highlight, so it's not quite looking exactly the way that I think of halation there, but the blooming is definitely, yeah, it almost looks like an angel. So let's dial that back quite a lot. Again, this scene isn't necessarily a film look scene. I just wanted to apply it here. I probably, again, would not use film breath. Maybe just a tiny bit of gate weave. Again, maybe we'll cut this in half. And we're looking pretty good. Oh, another thing I didn't mention, I can export a lookup table for this. So I can call if I really like this look, I can export this and call this my C-Log2 to Kodak 200T 2383 print lookup table if I'm really happy with it. Now, it's not going to export the film grain. It's not going to export the halation and the bloom and the breath and the weave. It might do the vignette. I don't think so. I don't think lookup tables are like spatially aware. It's more of just like this color comes in, this color comes out. So I don't think it's going to emulate the vignette either. But that is pretty cool that if I got this look and I needed to share it with another colorist or something, like if I just like, this is where I started, take it the rest of the way, they can kind of see where I started. So that's pretty cool. Let's jump into the last scene. This is kind of like the indie dramedy. Again, the C-Log2 color is there. I already applied film grain and a broadcast safe to make sure my highlights stay and my shadows stay within 0 to 100 in, standard Rec 709. Let's throw Dehancer on here. And again, choose a camera, Canon C70, C-Log2, and that's kind of cool. But that's not where I want to be. This has kind of got like a 500 Days of Summer kind of vibe. So let's see what we've got here. That's kind of fun. I think I just overexpose this just like a touch. Although I don't like the exposure compensation. Let's, again, just for the sake of time, just because I know where this is going and how these other tools work, I can just pop that in and give it a little push in the right direction. But now her hair is a little underexposed. I can also just use, I shot this a little hot, a little warm, so I can cool that off. But then I can compensate. Yeah, I guess that's very similar to what the temp and tint was doing in Dehancer. So let me reset that. Go back to Dehancer here. I shot this just a little too warm. I was trying to do like a little golden hour look, but it just can't. Maybe it just came off a little too pink. Yeah. But I could also like lean into the golden hour look if I wanted to as well. Let's see. I can also, kind of recover some of the hair there. And also just bring up the overall brightness. And yeah, we've still got, I'm going to turn off the grain. The grain's kind of throwing me off. I'm going to turn this off for now. But yeah, we've got some good density in the skin, but we could probably bring it up a little bit more. I don't want to bring it up too much. And then everything looks flat. Cool. Preserve exposure. Oh yeah, these tones are just more of like a temperature slider. So I could warm up the shadows and cool off the midtones, the skin tone. That's kind of cool. All right, let's turn that film grain back on and let's let's dial it back. It's very strong. That said, that for like an indie film, we can have a little bit of it, but maybe we'll go down to like 30 and 40 and 30, and let's look at this full screen. Yeah, that's a bit closer to what I'm imagining. Again, halation, there's not a lot of specular highlights in here to really kind of get that. There's some blooming, but man, that is way strong. I only want just like a tiny bit of blooming. Yeah. This could benefit from a vignette. That's nice. And some gate weave. Yeah. Make it feel like I shot this on like an old 16 millimeter Super 16 camera. Very cool. So that's Dehancer in Final Cut. Again, there are tools in DaVinci Resolve and Premiere, but there's also an iOS app. Let's take just a quick look at this. I just want to bring in a photo here that I took the other day. It was at golden hour. I think this could really benefit from some film grain effect. And it remembered from the last photo I edited, like the tools that I used. That's kind of cool. But again, all of the same film emulation right here. Now this was a photo. So let's switch this back. Let's switch this over to Portrait. And I believe if I hit edit here, yeah, I've got kind of all of the tools here. Exposure's down a little bit already. Here's 0. I wish I could just type in 0. But yeah, I pulled it down just a little bit. We've got that color density. Yeah, it really kind of makes those reds, the skin tone reds really pop. So the red in that peacock sign is there. And we are limiting it to analog range. What else do we have? Yeah, so all of those tools that were in the vertical stack of Final Cut are all here across the bottom. Yeah, I don't really need to change my temperature and tint, but if I wanted to warm it up a little bit, I could. But then I can also compensate the tint if I needed to. Let's cool that back off. I like the blue sky there. I can pick all the films. I can pick some color correction here. I can compress it to film range. I can kind of push the white point and black point. I can pick my film print. Again, I can do as if it was printed on paper or just scanned from the negative or printed on a different film. Just the linear versus the paper. I kind of wish it didn't, when I brought up the menu, it didn't dim the image. Makes it a little hard to A/B test. But other than that, yeah, let's keep it on the paper. That looks pretty cool. Again, we can like kind of color time and we can add film grain. All of the same tools here. This is great. Yeah, the film grain's a little strong here. Maybe bring it down in the midtones as well. Cool. We can simulate the halation. Again, I don't have any good specular highlight images to show you the halation tool, but yeah, the blooming really kind of comes in on the shop sign. That's kind of cool. We'll keep a little bit of that. I can add a vignette. It doesn't look like I've got tools to like crop and rotate, so I guess I'll just export this and just crop it in the photo app. But that's pretty cool. One last thing I've noticed in Final Cut, when I've got all of the effects on, I've got grain, bloom, vignette, halation, it will take a lot longer to export. So if you're already used to like M1, M2, Pro, Max, Ultra exporting speeds and ProRes or H.264 or 5, this is going to slow it down because it's essentially got to build all of these effects and build that image again, especially if you haven't rendered out your timeline in Final Cut, which I typically don't, although I probably will need to with this effect. And you don't need to make everything look like film. You don't need to use tools like this on every single video. Some things need to look modern. Some things need to look like they came from today. But when you're working on projects that look like a film, this is a really nice tool to kind of bring the film look into your videos. And you don't have to do a log film. There was a Rec 709 preset. That's what it came in with first. You can just drop that in on iPhone footage. You may need to convert HDR to SDR. And if you want to learn how to do that, leave a comment and let me know. I kind of want to make a bringing Dolby Vision iPhone footage into standard dynamic range projects video, but for another time. So thank you to Dehancer for letting me know about your tool, letting me try it for free. And if you want to try Dehancer, they've got a free trial on their website. And if you decide you want to buy it, there is an affiliate code in the doobly-doo that will save you 10% off of a full license of Dehancer. If you like this video, if you found it useful or helpful, give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.